The Nobel Peace Prize is the most controversial of the 5 Nobel Prizes: physics, chemistry, literature, peace, and physiology. Not only is this the most coveted, it's also the most significant out of all other awards. It's awarded to individuals who have done the best work for the fraternity of nations and for the eradication of groups and armies that encumber the massive promotion of peace among people of all nations. Ever since Alfred Nobel chose peace as a category for the Nobel Prize, it's been subject to several controversies. "They should have won" claims have been pervasive, and debates as to who is more deserving to win have been ongoing year after year. I'm Mike with this 25, and here's a list of the 25 people who should have won the Nobel Peace Prize, but didn't. 25. Václav Havel. As a Czech playwright, essayist, poet, dissident, and politician, Václav Havel was the last president of Czechoslovakia and the first president of the Czech Republic. During his time, he was widely acclaimed for his human rights work across Eastern Europe and has been named one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. And I forgot to put this on earlier because it's list miss.
But it's also...
Yeah. 24. Sahrawi Nusseibeh. Rather than support attacks on Israel, the way some of his fellow countrymen did, this Palestinian philosophy professor decided to focus on proactively helping his people in the midst of the bloodshed. His supporters believe that his passive, Gandhi-like struggle was what warranted him the Nobel Peace Prize. 23. Eleanor Roosevelt. More than just the first lady of a former U.S. president, Eleanor Roosevelt was as politically active as her husband. In fact, she was the one who led the first mission of the United States to the United Nations, allowing the U.S. to recognize how significant the UN was. As the woman behind the UN Commission on Human Rights, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the influence of Eleanor Roosevelt in the lives of many people remains today. 22. Pope John Paul II. John Paul II was acclaimed as one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century. He is credited with helping to end communist rule in his native Poland and eventually all of Europe. 21. Dorothy Day. One of the most significant personalities during the Great Depression, Dorothy Day organized the Catholic Worker Movement, a pacifist movement during the Second World War. Her mission was to help families rebuild their lives and promote peace by means of communal living and distributed wealth. Her movements eventually spread to both Canada and Europe and are still active today. 20. Ken Saro-Wiwa. Known as the Gandhi of Nigeria, Ken Saro-Wiwa was part of the Ogoni people, a minority in Nigeria, and he had always been honest about his grudges toward the government of his own country. Due to the displacement of his people and the exploiting of their resources for the gain of the Nigerian government, he formed an organization to protect the rights of the minority and led non-violent demonstrations on behalf of the persecuted. 19. Fazl Hasan Abed. Fazl Hasan Abed played a critical role in the rebuilding of Bangladesh after the Indo-Pakistani Wars of Separation. After the war, Bangladesh became an autonomous country, but was left severely devastated. To help his nation recover, he created and led BRAC, Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, a development organization that aimed to rebuild infrastructure in Bangladesh and help the people of his nation to re-establish their ravaged homes. This organization eventually became one of the largest development organizations in the world, with 8 countries under its fold, helping more than 100 million impoverished people worldwide. 18. Corazon Aquino. Known as the first female president in Asia, Corazon Aquino established a good number of democratic and humanitarian reform programs in the Philippines following the ousting of the former president, Ferdinand Marcos. The start of her reign marked the end of the dictatorial rule in the Philippines. She instituted a new constitution that emphasized the democracy of the Filipino people. She's considered today as one of the most influential women in the history of the world. 17. Irena Sendler. A Polish Roman Catholic nurse/social worker who served in the Polish underground during World War II, she smuggled some 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto and provided them with false identity documents, saving them from the Holocaust. 16. Mahatma Gandhi. Although most people know Gandhi, and he'd probably be the first person to pop into their head when thinking of peace prizes, he never actually won the Nobel. His influence, however, has been undeniable. 15. Dr. Feng Zhonghua. A former consul general of the Chinese embassy in Vienna, Dr. Feng Zhonghua is often dubbed as China's Schindler. During the 1940s, the Chinese ambassador to Berlin ordered Feng Zhonghua not to issue visas to prevent Jewish immigration. Zhonghua, however, refused to follow the order. Instead, he issued around 2,000 visas in a span of 6 months and saved thousands of Jewish lives. 14. Stephen Biko. Following the imprisonment of Nelson Mandela in 1964, Stephen Biko took the reins and became the head of the South African anti-apartheid movement. He was the one who founded the Black Consciousness movement and promoted the Brotherhood of Man. Along with his active involvement in the promotion of unity among all nations, he preached non-violence among his subordinates. He dedicated his life to leading peaceful protests until the apartheid police sought to kill him. 13. Abdul Sattar Edhi. Pakistani Abdul Sattar Edhi is the founder of the Edhi Foundation, an organization in charge of running the world's largest ambulance service. They also operate free nursing homes, orphanages, clinics, women's shelters, and rehab centers for drug addicts and the mentally ill. In November 2011, Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani recommended him for a Nobel Peace Prize. 12. Oskar Schindler. Probably the most well-known member of the Avenue of the Righteous, Oskar Schindler saved around 1,200 Jews from the hands of the Nazis by providing jobs for them in his own weapons factory during the Second World War. Though he knew that his life was in jeopardy, he never stopped employing the Jews and even paid millions to the Nazi Party just to compel them to leave the Jews to him. 11. Jose Figueres Ferrer. As the man who served as president of Costa Rica for 3 terms, Jose Figueres granted both men and women equal rights to vote. According to him, although men were generally stronger than women, the mental faculties of both genders had no difference. He pushed for the abolition of the Army of Costa Rica, as he believed that the police force was more than enough to enforce the domestic laws of the land. He gave citizenship to black immigrants and instituted civil service bureaucracy in his country. 10. Cesar Chavez. Dubbed as the Martin Luther King of Mexico, Cesar Chavez was the co-founder of the National Farm Workers Association in California, which is now called the United Farm Workers. He formed the association to help improve the working conditions for the common Latino laborers in his country. 9. Pope Pius XI. Prior to the Second World War, Pope Pius XI delivered a speech in front of the 250,000 pilgrims in Lourdes, France, stating that the Nazis were nothing but miserable plagiarists who dressed up old errors with new tinsel. Before the start of the war, he played a larger role in defending the Jews and Christians being persecuted under Nazi and Soviet regimes. 8. Jacques Delors. A French economist and politician, Jacques Delors was the 8th president of the European Commission and was the first man to have served the Commission for 3 consecutive terms. As the Minister of the Economics and Finance under President François Mitterrand, he actively promoted both the acceptance of the market economy and alignment with social democracy in Europe. 7. Bill and Melinda Gates. Through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Gates are the top philanthropists in the US, donating over $30 billion to combat extreme poverty and disease. They've helped improve the lives of millions through their research and funding. Awarded with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama in 2016, it seems high time they were also awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize. 6. Thich Nha Trang. A Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk, Thich Nha Trang was a peace activist who dedicated his life to participating in the peace movement and upholding nonviolent solutions to the conflicts going on in his country. He spent most of his life in the Plum Village Monastery in South France, but traveled extensively giving talks to thousands of people. 5. John Lennon. Although he has been a controversial figure, his music, his philanthropy, and his devotion to peace have left a lasting impact on the world. 4. Edward Snowden. Perhaps the most controversial person on this list, Edward Snowden was once a National Security Agency contractor who became alarmed after witnessing the use of top-secret computer software to spy on American citizens. He came forward as a whistleblower, leaking the documents and information to The Guardian before going into hiding in Russia. He helped bring to light a grave and serious threat to democracy, and gave the people the choice on how they wanted to handle it. 3. Morgan Tsvangirai. As the head of the movement for democratic change, Morgan Tsvangirai was the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe and the first Zimbabwe national to have ever been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. His nomination was on account of his governance in South Africa and the freedom of his people. 2. Father Nguyen Van Ly. Vietnamese Father Nguyen Van Ly was a Roman Catholic priest who got involved in several pre-democracy movements in Vietnam, for which he was imprisoned for 15 years. During his imprisonment, he continued to lead several nonviolent protests. In 2002, he was awarded the Homo Homini Award for Human Rights Activism in Vietnam. 1. Dr. Sima Samar. A female physician who funded the Shuhada Organization and Shuhada Clinic, Dr. Sima Samar was a human rights and democracy advocate in her native country of Afghanistan. She founded the Shuhada Organization when she recognized and was disturbed by the lack of health facilities for women and children. Ever since, she has been actively opposing the extremism and injustice that is commonly accepted as the status quo. So, do you know of anyone who should have won the Nobel Peace Prize but hasn't? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at List25. Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button on the bottom right and the notification bell so you don't miss out on new ones every Monday through Friday. Share them with your friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these videos here or just head to our website at list25.com. While you're there, make sure to join our newsletter for exclusive lists, prizes, and so much more. You really don't want to miss out on this.